Something quite interesting has been happening in Valorant since the turn of the year. It's like the collective pro scene decided 2022 came around, new year, new me, new gun to use. Because as 2021 went on and rolled into 2022, we saw a fairly big switch. In Masters Berlin last year, the Phantom was the preferred gun, getting picked 30% of the time versus 25% of the time of the Vandal across all rounds. By Champs in 2021, this had changed slightly, with both guns being picked at 28%. But at the last international tournament in Copenhagen this year, the Vandal was picked 41% of the time versus just 17% of the Phantom. So what gives? And why the change? And so first, let's just go through the stats overall. I'm sure some of you are well aware of these stats and, the differences between the two guns, but for those of you who aren't aware, let's just quickly run through it. So the Phantom and Vandal are obviously the main two rifle guns in the game, and they cost the same, as you can see. But one of the main differences, perhaps the main difference between the Phantom and Vandal, is to do with damage fall off at different ranges. The Vandal, as you can see, does not have any fall off at different ranges, whereas the Phantom does. And for a headshot, and this is particularly the main thing, I think, is that after 15 meters, 15 to 30 meters, your headshot on the Phantom will do 140 damage, which obviously is not enough to kill someone who has full shields, and they will be left on 10 HP, and that is very annoying when that happens. Probably the most frustrating thing in the entire game, which perhaps is one of the reasons. It also has a body damage fall off as well, as you can see, and so that is one of the big differences. But then when we look at the other side of the coin and some of the other differences, a lot of it does favor the Phantom. So the magazine size is a bit bigger, the fire rate is faster, there are no bullet tracers, whereas there are for the Vandal, which means that spraying through smokes is much more riskier with a Vandal. The spray control is generally considered easier on a Phantom as well, but as we can see, the Copenhagen play rate was much in favor of the Vandal. So why is this the case? And so let's come to the main first reason, I think, why the change happened. And it's to do with the meta, because here we're taking a look at Envy versus Gambit in the Masters Berlin final, so kind of, the peak of Phantom play. And just take a look at the team comps, because one of the things that, of course, we were in at this point was the Astra Viper meta. And you can see here on Split, both teams in both Envy and Gambit are running both Astra and Viper. So you have 4 controllers on the map. 4 controllers means that you have a lot of smokes. A lot of smokes means that bullet tracers matter perhaps a bit more, because you are going to be spamming through smokes probably quite a bit more than you would be if there was less controllers on the map. And so therefore, it makes sense to do that. I mean, you can even go perhaps one step further as we play this round through, in that both teams are also running Cypher, and both teams are also running Jet here. And of course, Cypher has 2 cages, and Jet has a couple smokes of her own as well. And so, I mean, she had 3 smokes at this point, as you can see there. That means that there's a lot of smokes, right? There's even more smokes. And of course, Jet was completely dominant at this point, and Cypher was not, like dominant or anything. There was no chamber, so you did tend to see a lot more Cypher in general. And so that means that you've just got a lot of agents all of a sudden that have some form of smoke, or, some kind of blocking of the enemy vision, which means the bullet tracers matter perhaps a lot more. We're looking at 8 of the 10 agents in the game here have some form of smoke in a way. So that is obviously going to make a big deal for bullet tracers in general, and it does make sense why that would be the case and why that has changed now, because of course now we see a lot more of chamber, we see a lot more rays than we did before, and neither of those agents have smokes, and they have generally replaced the Jet and the Cypher. And also Astra and Viper got nerfed pretty heavily, so we tend to see less double controller. Most maps outside of Bind, I would say, are generally not double controller maps anymore. So in general, you can see why there has been a lean towards the Vandal. It does make sense from just like a kind of, one of the main advantages the Phantom has over the Vandal just isn't quite as important as it once was. The second thing I want to point out is that pros probably just trust their aim a bit more than they used to, right? They probably are just slightly better players than they were before, because they've had more time to play the game, right? The game is getting, they have more experience with the game, they get a bit better, as you would expect. And so in this game, for instance, in the Masters Copenhagen final of Paper X versus FPX on this last map, Xiao had a 50% headshot percentage. So Getsu had a 45. I think Zipan had like a 37 as well, right? These are incredibly high numbers headshot percentage. And if you are hitting heads that often, it probably does make sense to pick the Vandal overall. It's going to be the better choice because you are going to get those 140s and you are going to be getting a lot of kills straight away if your headshot percentage is that high. And finally, one last point as we watch Ye here play in ranked is that if pros, go into their ranked games, they probably feel like they are the best player in that ranked game. Then they are probably going to use the Vandal thinking that, they can headshot their opponents more than, they're going to headshot them. And so, they pick the Vandal in ranked games. And then for ranked games, that means that they, play it more in scrims. And then if you're playing it in scrims, you play it in officials. And you just get more comfortable with that gun overall. You just play the Vandal in all of your games. So why would you swap when it comes to official games as well? You just are going to feel more comfortable with how the Vandal performs overall. And so you end up using it more in official games. However, we have seen some teams potentially lean away from this. One notable one was DRX in Masters Copenhagen. They must have made up quite a bit of the Phantom usage overall because they very commonly pick the Phantoms. I mean, you can see here we're playing on Breeze in their game against FPX. This is the first time that these two teams played. And you can see that 4 out of 5 of them have Phantoms here on Breeze, right? Breeze is the map that even when the Phantom was at its height in popularity, on Breeze, most teams would still be picking Vandals overall because it's such a big map and you're going to have longer range fights. But here, DRX still went with the Phantom, which is quite an interesting choice. And, when they did it, I don't think it really cost them in any way. They did pretty well with it overall, it seems. So it didn't seem like it was a big disadvantage here. But, they did lead into it a bit more, perhaps going a bit counterculture, to where the rest of the game really was, leaning into these Phantoms. And you're going to see that in this round, here as we run this forward, they are going to get some kills from some of these longer range fights with the Phantoms. Clearly, felt experienced enough. They did somewhat pivot away from it, I think, on some of their later Breeze games. But particularly early on in the tournament, they really ran heavy with this kind of Phantom use. And what you're going to see here is we're going to get a push from these two FPX players here. But what DRX do is they turn around and you can see they get those kills with those Phantoms and manage to win the round. And then they are going to manage to just absolutely mop up this round and get a flawless win. And so why did DRX choose to go with Phantoms even on a map like Breeze? Well, I think one of the reasons might be that ever since NRG decided to do this crazy strat, and even slightly before this, where they only buy light shields, we have seen more and more teams lean into light shields. Because if you are playing against Vandals, and you can see here they're doing it here as well, where they have enough money to buy, but they only have light shields here. If you are doing this, light shields, the time to kill against a Vandal is the same. Assuming you don't take any chip damage anywhere else, it's 4 body shots and it's 1 headshot no matter what for both light and full shields. So, we are seeing more and more people, if you are expecting to come up against Vandals, it doesn't matter essentially. And so, we are seeing more teams get more aggressive with the economy, right? Use those light shields a bit more than they otherwise would. And, it's become kind of a theme. But that is one reason that DRX might have chose the Phantom because, a Phantom against light shields is kind of OP, to be honest, because all of a sudden that 140 headshot gets you a kill. And, if that is the case, then the Phantom, I would say, is definitely the better gun if the 140 headshot is getting you that kill. So, that is kind of one reason I would suspect that DRX did go for it, because we are seeing more light shields and people being a bit more aggressive with the economy overall. FPX are a team that obviously has their kind of interesting second and third round buy that includes, using a lot of light shields. I think if you were playing against FPX, you probably do want to use Phantoms, particularly in those early rounds, because of that. And so, yeah, I think that is one reason where it's kind of like, maybe the meta should actually shift more towards Phantoms, and we might see it a bit more because of those light shields being bought more often. And so the concept of Phantom versus Vandal will continue to rage on, I'm very sure. But I think overall they're probably actually pretty close, to be honest. I think it just seems that they, this debate has gone on for so long because, Riot has probably done a good job in giving each of the guns different advantages and whatnot. And it's probably more down to a personal preference. The pros, as you can sort of see, seem to believe that right now the Vandal is a bit better in this certain meta. But maybe if Double Controller came back or something like that, we would see again more Phantoms being used and, in time. But if you are Sugetsu, maybe keep with the Vandal because you can do this. And, but obviously, if you're watching this, you probably can't do what he just did. Yeah. So it kind of is down, I think, to more of a personal preference overall, and the debate, I'm sure, will rage on into the future.